Hey everyone, Firegrass here, and today we're going to be reviewing what I think is the best balanced manifesto this game has seen in years. Rather than just read through the manifesto, I've prepared slides based on the problem solution format. Let me know in the comments if you find this effective, and we'll do more of it in the future. Now this first thing I am super excited about, and that is the buff to handcasting. Basically, self-casting abilities is being buffed by 30 to 60%, and they accomplish this by just buffing the base skills, and then nerfing all of the ways of triggering those skills. So they've nerfed Totems, Traps, Arcanist Brand, Battle Mage Crier, Cast on Crit, Minds, Intuitively, Link, Spellslinger, Poet's Pen, and Soul Mantle. And these nerfs are pretty significant, but when you weigh them against the buff to the base skills, a lot of them are damage neutral. You know, in some cases you have like, Freezing Pulse Totems has received an 8% buff, but Ice Spear Totems have received a 2.5% nerf. I think the big losers here are things like Eye of Winter Totems. Now, Eye of Winter didn't receive any buff at all, but Totems did receive a nerf. So if you played Eye of Winter Totems, you got a very massive nerf, and this will be felt, but I think some collateral is okay, because overall this is vastly improving the health of the game. I think the game, something that has really hurt the game for a long time is the fact that the best skills in the game are all like trap and totem builds and stuff like that, and, you know, it's just very jarring for a new player to, you know, be drawn to this game and to really like the idea of like the archetypical mage where, you know, you throw out your hand and fire comes out, and they get told, actually, right, if you want to play this mage, you gotta do it with a trap. You throw a trap and instead the trap throws out the fire. I think this is really going to help make Path of Exile a better game in the long run. There will be some teething problems in the short term, but basically, you know, like, most skills, most playstyles are damage neutral, but all the self-casting versions of those playstyles have been buffed massively. I think this is really good. Now, on top of this, they've also nerfed Ignite by 28%. Now, Ignite was kind of getting a little too strong with the buffs it received last patch, so I think this nerf is okay. And they've also compensated some of the Ignite nerfs with and some of the Trap and Totem nerfs with buffs to specific skills, such as like Holy Flame Totem, Explosive Arrow, etc., so that the collateral damage that these skills received is buffed back and made up for, right? Now, we've also had Threshold Jewels being removed or nerfed, so like the Spark and EK Threshold Jewels are losing their other bonuses, but they're keeping the Nova thing, so basically when you socket these jewels in, all they're going to do is add the Nova capabilities to them. They're not going to add the extra projectiles and stuff like that, or the extra, extra projectiles. Now, in the case of First Snow for Freezing Pulse and stuff like that, these were just removed entirely, right? And I think this is a bit of a bigger problem. We'll talk about that maybe in tomorrow's video a bit more. Now, they've also buffed cast speed on gear from essences, from veiled mods, etc. So because self-casting is probably going to become more prominent, they have also, I guess, acknowledged that cast times at their base level feel a little too high, and they're compensating this by giving us more access to cast speed so that we can, you know, lower those cast times and not feel too hampered down by how long it takes to get an actual spell out. Now, one other thing to talk about is that Orb of Storms was buffed very significantly. I don't know what they've done for Fire and Cold skills to, you know, give those playstyles a similar sort of buff, but basically with Orb of Storms, it received a very, very massive buff. I think it was like a 60 to 70% buff, roughly. And they've also changed the way it targets so that your own positioning isn't really important, just as long as you're in the Orb of Storms when you cast it. And then as long as the enemy is within range of the Orb of Storms, they're going to get hit. You don't need to actually be near the enemy you want to hit anymore. Orb of Storms also has a slightly higher base duration. So if you get a tiny bit of skill duration into your build, which, you know, a lot of skills have reasons to sort of get this where it's sort of free or easy to get, you're basically not going to have to cast Orb of Storms a lot in order to get it back down. Now, I think this is going to lead to the rise of double 6-link playstyles where you might play like Arc with Orb of Storms, or with like an Agnod stuff or a Pledge of Hand stuff or something. You put down your Orb of Storms near the boss, and then you like spam Arc, and Orb of Storms will also do its damage. So like, I think the old Arc on a single target situation was doing like roughly 900 average damage in terms of base damage per cast, and if you look at a double 6-link Orb of Storms with 6-link Arc, it's now doing like 1900 damage per cast. So like, its overall damage, the overall damage of that playstyle, since you can now viably add Orb of Storms as a 6-link without incurring too much penalty, it's like more than doubling the damage output of Arc. And similar lightning spells. I think this is going to be really huge. Like, this is potentially a game changer. We're not going to know until we get to play with it, but this is a really big deal. I think this is the buff self-casting is needed for a long time. Basically just, like, there is a penalty associated with playing totems and traps and stuff like that now. Like, you are playing a much weaker version of the skill. You're no longer playing a version of the skill that's stronger than the base version. You are actually sacrificing DPS in order to have auto-targeting and auto-casting and stuff like that. And I think that's the version... that's the version of the game that we need, right? We need a game where if you want these skills to have automatic targeting and automatic casting and stuff like that, they need to have a penalty associated with them compared to the base skill. And the way this was achieved was by buffing the self-casting rather than by just nerfing totems and traps. 10 out of 10. I love this. I was really stressed when I heard about a 12-page manifesto, and then I read this, and all that stress went away. I couldn't wait to get home from work to make this video. Now, this one is a really big one as well, and something I am personally very excited about. Bows are getting buffed. And it's not like 3.9 Bow League, where they actually nerfed a lot of bow playstyles. Bows are actually getting buffed this time, and in some pretty significant ways. Now, bows are receiving larger added damage modifiers, so the top end of bows is going to be a lot stronger, right? So I think they just said that, like, the added damage modifiers on bows were going to be the same as what they are on two-handed weapons. Now, this is pretty good considering that bows also have other modifiers, like +2 arrows and stuff, that basically means like a top-end bow is going to be really, really, really good compared to like what a top-end two-handed weapon is going to be for those, you know, for the skills you play them with. In addition to that, we're receiving new Quiver base types, so I think there's like a Fizz as extra chaos damage Quiver base type, and some of the older Quiver base types are also receiving buffs. Quivers are also receiving stronger modifiers, so if I recall correctly, there's like stronger attack speed, stronger accuracy. +1 arrows is now not going to be an influence only mod, it's going to just be a basic suffix that you can roll on any Quiver in the game. Now, this is kind of a nerf in some ways, when you're looking at Awakening Slamming an item, because you can no longer Awaken Slam a +1 arrow with something else, but I think overall this might end up being a buff, and it may improve the accessibility of the +1 arrow suffix, especially since all the Quivers you pick up now are going to be able to roll +1 arrow, which means you're going to be able to go to the trade site and easily find a +1 arrow Quiver that also might have some other good stats on it. And on top of that, you also have bow masteries on the tree being buffed. We're not going to go into great detail about that since they're kind of simple, but basically like the Mirage Archer duration is being increased by from 50% to 100%, stuff like that. They're not major, but you know, all these incremental things are going to add up. And there is also like when you're looking at like chaos damage bow attacks, for example, so like my Tornado Shot Cultist from last league, for example, it's going to be a lot easier to now make a chaos damage bow that's better than a Darkscorn. Now, that was possible previously, but you were looking at like 50 to 100x in order to deterministically craft such a bow, and now you're not going to be looking at that anymore. To create a bow better than Darkscorn is not going to require that much currency, but the top end bows are going to be much better than Darkscorn. I'm very excited about this change. It may not be enough, right? Like, there are still going to be a lot of bow skills that are just rendered virtually unplayable. They're still going to be D and C tier. You know, like, let's not kid ourselves about that. This isn't like a super massive buff where we're just like doubling bow damage, but these are really good steps in the right direction, and now we know GGG cares about this, and GGG understands that this is a problem, that, you know, as you can see, what they've written here is that hit-based bow attacks require an unreasonable amount of investment, and that's been something the player base has been complaining about for a long time. So I get the feeling that if these buffs aren't enough, they're going to then buff them further in the future, right? They understand that it's kind of dumb that you have an entire archetype within the game that just randomly costs like 50 to 100x to get started in, so that you can start playing, you know, the cool, fun skills that you see streamers playing, and there's just no reason for it. Like, there's no reason to just randomly make one whole archetype super expensive and cost like 100 times more than another archetype. So this is a really good change. I love it. I am all for it. Please, more of this. So the next thing is kind of a bit of a nerf. So the added Cold, Lightning, and Chaos Damage support gems and the Awakened versions, they did not receive nerfs during the Great Support Gem nerf of, I think it was 3.15. And a lot of people complained about this because this kind of skewed the balance of support gems a little. Now, traditionally, these gems were kind of used as like beginner level gems. You added them onto your build, and then when you could get added Cold, Lightning, and Chaos Damage from other sources, you ditched them for more multipliers, and that's how it should have been. But it turns out for a lot of builds, you now just you include these gems automatically because they're just so much stronger than all the alternatives. And I think it's kind of healthy to have these things nerfed. Now, they are compensating by buffing weapon and spell damage modifiers on, you know, like gear, right? So this isn't like a huge nerf to actual playstyles. This is just going to be like a nerf to the gems, and then you can compensate for that loss of damage elsewhere, so a typical character isn't going to be receiving a nerf. It's just these gems. It's just the beginning, like the entry-level damage for these playstyles, I guess. And more importantly, this is a nerf to the value of Paradoxica. Now, one of the reasons Paradoxica has seen a big increase in price lately, and it's very prominent in a lot of melee builds, is because Paradoxica is just taking this added cold, lightning, or chaos damage that you can apply to melee skills via these gems, and it's just doubling it, right? And this is kind of insane. I think this is good, right? Like, this is kind of infringed upon design space a little, and toning this down, you know, means we can get... I think it's always a good thing when they shift damage onto, like, gear and stuff, and make gear a little more valuable or a little more interesting, especially since, like, added damage on gear hasn't really been that important in recent years. So, like, a couple of years ago, getting added damage on your gear was one of the main ways to scale a lot of skills, and now it's kind of just not important at all, because you just slap one of these gems into your build and you're done. Hydrosphere is being nerfed, and this comes as a surprise to exactly no one. Now, a lot of skills have been using Hydrosphere in the last few patches in order to double their single target DPS. Everything from, like, one projectiles abusing, like, Pierce and Return, to skills like Lightning Strike and Frostblades using tools such as +1 Strike or Chain and things like that, in order to just outright double their single target DPS against the boss. And I think it's a really good thing that this is being dealt with, right? We don't want Hydrosphere being this, like, iconic way to kill a boss, right? Like, not every build needs to, should have to include a Hydrosphere, and the way they're nerfing it is by giving it a 1-second cooldown, I believe, in terms of how often you can hit and interact with the Hydrosphere. So this means that the purpose of Hydrosphere originally, where you can afflict it with ailments, still remains, but it can no longer be abused to proliferate your damage against a single target. Now, this is good. Surprises no one. The only thing I'm kind of sad about is that a lot of these skills were only kind of viable at a high level, like, or were considered top tier builds because of the Hydrosphere interactions. This is, like, once people discovered the Hydrosphere interactions, this is what brought the skill to the next level and allowed people to start playing this as, like, their main build or the main thing they invested in. And these skills aren't receiving any compensatory buffs from what I can see. I think that's probably a little sad. You may see a little less Lightning Strike in the future, probably a little less Frostblades. Not the end of the world, though, right? Obviously, we need to consider the health of the game over the strength of one or two skills. It is definitely unfortunate, but, it had to happen. We all knew it was going to happen. So what, right? Now, the other thing to talk about on this slide are the triggering of marks and the way that's being changed. So they're basically adding a mark on hit support gem, and they're also making mark skills apply permanently. So you mark a boss, and then the boss is permanently affected by that mark. You don't have to keep recasting it every few seconds. This is really good. This is pretty much a buff. And then the way the mark on hit support gem is going to work is, it's not like Curse on Hit where you have to link it to a specific trigger spell. You're going to have the mark on hit support gem linked to a mark, and then anytime you attack a rare or unique target, it's going to apply the mark to that target. Now, obviously, it has a small cooldown involved, so that if you are, like, cleaving down a pack of rares, it's only going to apply to one rare and then not trigger again for a few seconds or something like that. And it's going to have a small curse effect penalty applied to it, so that if you want to, like, truly maximize your DPS, you won't use the mark on hit thing. The mark on hit is just there for convenience. For builds that have enough damage and don't need any more damage, they want convenience now. Now, the thing to talk about here that I've seen a lot of people miss is this won't apply to spells. So if you're a spellcaster, you still need to apply your mark if you're going to use a mark. Like, Stormbrand players using an Assassin's Mark, you're still going to have to hardcast that. Mark on hit's not going to work with spells, right? I don't know why. I feel like it kind of could, and it probably wouldn't have made that big of a difference. I don't think it would have been harmful to the game, but I guess I just did it for flavor purposes, not the end of the world. There's some other stuff concerning the Deadeyes, so like when you kill a target with marks, it's going to proliferate the mark to another target. Not a big deal, right? But yeah, basically just buffing marks and nerfing Hydrosphere. I'm very surprised this wasn't the way Fortification worked when they originally reworked it, but it is how it works now. So they're changing Fortify to ignore damage reduction on mobs. Now, the problem here was that when you were doing like high-level Delirium maps or Simulacrum or Delve, when you were getting particularly deep, the mobs had a lot of damage reduction, and then that kind of became a huge problem for you because Fortification was based on the amount of damage you dealt. You weren't dealing a lot of damage, you weren't getting any Fortification, and you were just kind of like dying. Now, Leech has the same problem. They haven't fixed this problem for Leech. Maybe it's intended to work this way for Leech. So if you are a build that relied upon your mana Leech in order to sustain your mana, you probably noticed when you were doing Simulacrum, you weren't able to sustain your mana as easily anymore because of the damage reduction. I'm glad they fixed this for Fortify. I suspect they're probably never going to touch it for Leech. They probably want that, you know, they want leech working that way, perhaps. I think they should fix it for mana leech, but it's not the end of the world. Much more important for Fortify. Fortify is a defensive mechanic that, you know, people build around, and it feels very bad that for a lot of builds you just haven't been able to use Fortification at all, because the kind of content you are aiming to do just doesn't allow for Fortification to work. So, great change. Should have been in the game initially, but, you know, better late than never. Here is the Detonate Dead nerf that everyone saw coming a mile away. So basically, corpses now have a 15% chance to be a Spectre corpse, regardless of how many Spectres are in the pool. Now, a lot of you probably are out on loop on this, but basically the way Detonate Dead builds were working was that they were filling up the Spectre pool with really high life minions, and that gave... the way Spectres work is that they had an increased chance to spawn from Desecrate. So you would fill up your Spectre pool with these like giga health corpses. You would then Desecrate and get a whole bunch of these high health corpses in your Desecrate, like in the pool of corpses that you just spawned, and then you would detonate them and deal insane amounts of damage. I believe Lighty cleared most of the endgame content using only magic gear by abusing this interaction. Now, in the upcoming patch, the way it's going to work is that with a 15% fixed chance for a corpse to be a Spectre, when you have Undertaker and you have 12 max corpses and you use a spell Cascade Desecrate, you're going to spawn 12 corpses, but only 1.8 of them on average are going to be Spectre corpses. And it doesn't matter how many Spectres you put into the Spectre pool, right? It's a fixed chance now. And this most importantly impacts the Maven Arena abuse. So the problem with the Maven Arena was that there weren't as many mobs in the pool, so when you filled it up with your Spectre pool, basically every corpse was one of these high life Spectres, which was kind of insane. You were just dealing insane amounts of damage when you were detonating dead in the Maven Arena. No longer a thing. It's not gonna matter what area you're in. You're just gonna have this fixed chance no matter what. Doesn't matter how many Spectres are in your pool. Doesn't really matter what area you're in. Nothing. Like, it's just gonna be consistent damage. It's still going to be beneficial for you to put a high life Spectre corpse into your Desecrate pool. I don't like this at all. I quite frankly think that the fact that Spectre life can impact this just shouldn't be a thing. I think if you want to play Detonate Dead, you should be able to play Detonate Dead without having to go fish for like one of these high life corpses, then keep them alive forever and all that. I just think everything relating to Spectre mechanics in this game is kind of clunky. Yeah, it belongs in like the 1990s, to be perfectly honest. Everyone I've spoken to says that should have just gone away completely. It's really weird that they decided to like intentionally keep it in, but nonetheless they're nerfing the power level, and that was the main thing. So the people who liked this interaction, I guess, can keep using it, but they're going to be a lot weaker. I suspect not a lot of people are going to be playing Detonate Dead in the upcoming patch, and we may see Detonate Dead come back in the future if its power level is still kind of appropriate in order to clear content. But I think the whiplash of the amount of lost power means that people probably won't be playing this for the time being. Seismic Trap is being nerfed, and this is another one of those things that we all saw coming, and it should have happened to patch sooner. So the way they're nerfing Seismic Trap is simply that they're nerfing the AoE scaling on it, so that when you scale AoE with Seismic Trap, it will increase its total coverage, but it's not going to increase its ability to overlap. I suspect this is probably going to be a little similar to the way the change they made to Toxic Rain, although Toxic Rain still does allow for a certain breakpoint of AoE to cause some beneficial amount of overlap. Basically, this is probably going to end up being a very large nerf to Seismic Trap, but we don't know the exact numbers on this, and more importantly, we don't have any access to in-game testing, so we can't tell, right? This is going to be one of those things where I would highly recommend people who are preparing Seismic Trap to abandon that and to not leak Seismic Trap in 3.17, and to then do testing in the lead up to 3.18 to see if this is still kind of workable as a league starter. Now, this playstyle was very bothersome. It had a lot of problems, such as delayed damage and stuff like that. I suspect that if it no longer has the benefit of having insane damage and being able to like absolutely blow up bosses really quickly, not a lot of people are going to play this. So this may be a dead skill, but we won't know until we have more information. Toxic Rain is getting nerfed yet again. It's only being nerfed by 16.5%. Some of the power that it's losing is going to be compensated with the Quiver buffs, but not that much, right? I think GGG are overstating how much the Quiver buffs are going to be buffing Toxic Rain. Especially in a League Start situation, you're not going to have any access to the extra Quiver mods being added into the game. Yeah, I think this is probably going to stop a lot of people from playing Toxic Rain as a League Starter. Now, I know when I did my Toxic Rain League Starter, it was always just on the cusp of not having enough damage to do the kind of content I was wanting to do. Now, admittedly, that was kind of like with no gear in an SSF situation, so I guess on trade, you could still always scale it with, like, Chaos Dot multi-gear and stuff like that. But I think this is going to make Toxic Green one of those builds where if you like the skill, you're going to keep playing it and you're going to keep succeeding with it, but it's not like this god tier league starter that everyone can use and everyone can kill Cirrus with, you know, despite not understanding how to gear and stuff like that. It's just going to have a higher skill cap effectively, a higher knowledge cap. It's not free. Yeah, I think this bumps Toxic Rain down to like A tier. It's not the worst. It's not the biggest nerf in the world. The skill definitely isn't dead, but I definitely understand a lot of people who aren't going to be playing Toxic Rain anymore, and, you know, understandably so. My favorite nerf of all fucking time. March of the Legion is being killed. Hell yeah! The March of the Legion nerf is basically just only allowing you to use it on a single aura rather than 4. Now, I used to liken this to learning to play the piano. When you start to learn to play the piano, you only have to use, like, your right hand, right? And that's kind of like what fast piano is. And then March of the Legion comes in, and then that's like learning to use the piano with your left hand as well. So you're playing with your right and your left hand. Kind of like how, you know, with March of the Legion, you are playing fast piano and aura piano. That's gone. I'm really, really, really a big fan of this because basically, like, the strongest builds in the game, the strongest simulacrum farmers, all that sort of stuff, a lot of them were using March of the Legion, and a lot of people had a similar experience to me. We tried to play March of the Legion, and then we hated it. It sucks, and it really especially sucks that you feel bad for the fact that you don't like playing it, right? It's like, here is this really powerful version of the build you're playing, but you can't play with all this extra power because it makes you hate yourself, and it makes you want to go play a different game. I built a armor aura stacker last league, and I quit that shit before I even got around to streaming it. It took less than a day for me to quit that build because I was just not going to be playing that. It was not happening, right? And I am 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10. This is the best change PoE has ever gotten. Okay, so in addition to making it only reserve 1 aura, it's now going to be costing mana instead of reserving it. I'm not really sure what their implications are there. I guess that is kind of a nerf technically. Mortal Conviction is now also going to become a gem. I believe it's being taken off the passive tree, and the way that's going to work is that it's going to allow you to reserve 1 aura for free, but you can no longer use mana anymore. I don't see a lot of people using it, but, you know, I'm glad it's being turned into a gem rather than being stuck on the passive tree, because there are probably some builds on the other side of the tree that might want to use this. Okay. Blessing is also going to become a support gem, and you're no longer going to need the boots in order to access the Blessing effect. The boots will provide a better version of it, so that there's still some reason to use the boots, but if you just want to access the ability to, you know, pay some mana and get a temporary aura effect, then you're going to be able to do that via a support gem. Depending on how it's balanced, this may be meta. I could see a lot of builds using this, and I'm not looking forward to that. I'm not looking forward to every build you play. You now have 1 extra button, which you have to press every, like, you know, 12 to 15 seconds or whatever. Not a fan of this in particular, but it depends on how it's balanced. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe they make the cost so high that you just can't afford to use it. I suspect, based on the way they're talking, that that's going to be how it works. That if you're already reserving most of your mana on auras, you're not going to be able to pay the mana cost to use Blessing, and Blessing is going to be like for Archmage characters and stuff like that. Now, that will be a good change. I definitely look forward to that being the case, and it's also like a buff to the Archmage playstyle, which really needs a buff, let's be honest. Okay, they're also changing Supreme Ego so that it no longer limits you to 1 aura, but the amount of aura effectiveness it grants is based on how much mana you reserve, and I suspect that having mana reservation efficiency is going to then work against this a little, so that you can fit more auras, but then all the auras you're getting are gaining less increased aura effect from Supreme Ego. Not sure how that's going to work out in practice. We're going to have to see numbers on this before we can, you know, have a judgment on this. This might be good, right? I don't know that they needed to make this change if they were already nerfing March of the Legion, but maybe this is good. I know a lot of builds just aren't taking Supreme Ego anymore for various reasons, and maybe this means that there's more reason to use Supreme Ego. Now, I suspect basically Supreme Ego's main use is going to be like if you have a handful of auras that you really like and are really powerful, but all the other mana reservation effects available to you are kind of a waste of mana, and you would rather just run stronger versions of the auras you already have at the cost of extra mana. There's nothing that really gives you access to that, and I think this is cool. You know, this is probably the right way to go about making Supreme Ego work. Not much to say on this one. Basically, Shadeform is being changed to work the way all cooldown-based skills work, pretty much, where they're just going to pause while the skill is active, and then Strength of Blood is no longer going to be able to reach 100% damage reduction. Now, Strength of Blood has been being abused for a long time. I'm very surprised it took this long to be fixed. I think the main reason why it took this long is because there weren't too many practical applications for it in the past, and it was mostly just something that hardcore Andes were abusing on the down low. Obviously, a lot of these guys didn't have YouTube channels and stuff like that, so there wasn't a lot of hype generated around it, and it remained a niche thing for a while. But yeah, basically Infinite Boneshatter is dead, damage immunity is dead for the time being. There's probably going to be other forms of damage immunity that people figure out in, the future. I have already received a Discord message after the Manifesto came out with someone showing me a new way to achieve damage reduction. I'm not going to talk about that because I have, as I've explained to this person, I think they may be a little flawed in how they think their particular mechanic works. Yeah, I'm sure if it works the way that this person thinks it will, that it will become pretty popular in no time, and I'm sure it'll get nerfed again, before 3.18. We talked about this in another video, but basically Dancing Dervish is being buffed. It's losing its inherent rampage and instead gaining the ability to rampage on melee hits. This is a buff in pretty much all circumstances. You don't have to use Writhing Jaws anymore, you don't have to use Flask Nodes. The only penalty really is having to melee hit the enemies in order to start your rampage. Previously you could have like flame dashed over your jar of worms, like the worms that you generated from your Writhing Jar. This might be like a tiny nerf to people who literally don't have any skill gem slots available and are running double onset rings and all that when you're already dealing tens of millions of damage. The thing is though, when you're already dealing tens of millions of damage and you're feared viable with this build, I think losing like 3% of your DPS isn't the end of the world, and the fact that you get 3 nodes on the tree, not having to invest in flask nodes, and you get some flasks back by not having to run Writhing Jaws, probably works out to be a buff anyway. I know one individual is very angry at me for saying that this was a buff, but we'll have to see in the upcoming patch whether I'm wrong or they are wrong. But yeah, overall I think this is a really good thing, but if you want to hear more about it, you can just watch my other video on it since I go into more depth in it there. Don't really know what to make of this one. I don't think I can ever recall a time I actually placed a banner down. I've used banner skills before, but I've never bothered placing them down. I've just treated them like passive auras. Basically what this means is that if you're using Perfidy, which I think is a body armor, and you use Dread Banner, that when you place it down, rather than having massively increased duration on your Fortify, you're just going to receive a few extra Fortify stacks instead. So this is probably a nerf to the people who are doing this, and probably a decent nerf too. Losing like, I think it was like 200% increased duration on the Fortify, the temporary Fortify you got. That could be like a pretty big nerf, but I don't know many people that were doing that in the first place, and like, I don't know. I actually don't know. Speak to like one of the hardcore Andes that were playing this if you want more information on this, because I don't fucking know, guys. Last one up is the Voidfletcher Nerf. Now, Voidfletcher has kind of crowded out a lot of other quivers in the past, and it's sort of infringed upon the ability to balance quivers and bows, right? Or at least I imagine it has been. It's a very powerful quiver, and if you manage to corrupt off the pierce implicit on the quiver, then you can start chaining and stuff while also wielding the quiver, which it's kind of just too strong, right? And then there's also the abuse with the Timeless Jewel and the sharing of the charges with, I think, Mirror Arrow or whatever, right? I guess this is good, right? Like, the other quivers are being buffed, so we're probably just gonna like have more options, and Voidfletcher isn't going to feel as mandatory. It really depends. If they nerf it by too much, then I probably won't be too happy. Like, I don't want to see this dead and in the gutter. It's still a very iconic quiver, and I think what it does is also pretty iconic. Like, it's a really nice way to supplement your single target damage in maps and stuff. So like, it's not good for like serious killing and stuff, because the charges, they don't recharge instantly or anything, but it's really nice when you have just enough damage to almost kill a boss, like burst the boss down in maps where you can just go like into a T16 map, get to the map boss, and barrage all of your Voidfletcher charges into the boss, and then the boss blows up because you also have enough supplementary damage from your actual main skill and stuff like that. Probably isn't going to matter. I don't know. We'll have to see the exact numbers, and we'll have to get a feel for it to have a stronger opinion on it. But overall, I probably think this is good. It's probably going to be good. I hope I'm not wrong. This is probably the best Manifesto I ever recall. I'm not saying it's the best Manifesto ever. It's probably the best Manifesto I recall reading, though, in my time playing the game. It gets a 5 out of 5 easily. The most egregious mechanics, that being like Detonate Dead and the immunity mechanics, they were nerfed, and they should have been nerfed, and that's really good. Defenses weren't nerfed, and this was a really big one for me. I was very stressed that we were going to see spell suppression and stuff like that nerfed. I still highly suspect spell suppression nerfs and, you know, armor nerfs are coming in 3.18, but they're not being nerfed for the time being. Basically, this was just a nerf to only the worst mechanics that absolutely needed to be nerfed because they were harming the game's health, and we received very massive buffs to self/handcasting in addition to buffs to all the bow stuff. Like, this is really good. This is a great manifesto. They all can't be this good, right? Like, obviously not every manifesto can just be full of buffs to the things that the play base has been asking for ages. And I definitely think this is in some ways a response to the sheer amount of negativity that has surrounded the game, you know, in the past year or so. GGG have been holding out on a lot of this stuff and have just outright been disagreeing with the playbase that a lot of this stuff needed buffs. And I think GGG are giving in and seeing, like, there's no point being right if no one's playing our game, you know, like, and that's a really important thing I've been saying for a long time, is that it really doesn't matter if GGG is right about a certain balance issue if no one is around to play the game. If everyone just quits, right, and you have like 90% player drop off after a couple of weeks, it doesn't matter that you were right because you didn't make the game fun anymore, right? And so stuff like this is really good. The hand casting stuff is going to especially matter to new players, people who just want to play a mage. You know, they just want to throw out their hands and shoot fire, as I mentioned earlier. This stuff is good again, and so it should be, right? This was a great manifesto all around. I can't sing its praises enough. And yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. It was a great manifesto. Can't criticize it. Sorry for the longer form video. As you guys know, I don't like doing them too long if I don't have to, but manifestos are a big one, and I think it's warranted. We're going to probably have another long video tomorrow. I'm going to be providing, like, the mathematics on all of the buffs and nerfs, so that you can specifically see whether your build was buffed or nerfed, depending on how you played it, whether you played it self-cast, totems, traps, etc. We're just going to have an easy-to-read format so that you can just look at the video and hopefully skim through it, find the skill that you're interested in, and know how it feels. As I mentioned in the intro, if you like this format, please let me know in the comments, and then I'll do more of it. If you disliked it and you're kind of getting tired of looking at basically PowerPoint rather than actual gameplay, also let me know that, and we'll see what we can do about that. I guess there hasn't been much gameplay to showcase, but we'll do what we can. If you like this video, give me a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys tomorrow.